Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Carlton. I hope you guys are all doing well. Today we're going to continue with cones and we're going to work on volume still, but we're going to switch it up because today we're going to start with volume and work backwards to find the missing height or radius. So let's get our notes ready. This is section 8.2 continued. So we're still working in section 8.2. If you wanted in the book, it's on page 342 and 343. Let's label this cone volume, and it's missing height or radius. I think my pen is running out. Just like at school, right guys? My pens are running out. Okay, I'll switch colors. Okay, so when we're talking about a cone, remember our formula for cone. V equals pi times r squared times the height divided by 3. Okay, because remember a cone is 1/3 the size of a cylinder that has the same dimensions. Okay, so when you look at a cone, okay, it looks like that. If you had a cylinder that was the same height, then it would kind of be like this. And your cone fits down inside. So the pieces that are missing are here and here. That's why your cone is 1/3. Okay, it's just that middle piece. Okay, so what we want to look at today is example 2 in the textbook. So if you have your textbook at home, or you could go to bigideasmath.com and look at the textbook. But the cone looks like this. It's a sideways cone, so go ahead and draw this on your paper. Start with this shape first. Then you fill in the dotted line. And the dimensions they give us are the height is h, so that's the missing piece. We don't know what it is. We know that the radius is 9 feet, okay, and we also know that the volume is 956 feet cubed. Okay, so we're going to do like we always do, start with our equation and fill in what we know. So we know the volume, so we're going to start with 956 equals pi times radius is 9 squared, times height divided by 3. Okay, so now we have some knowledge about equations, so we're going to solve this equation and get h by itself. So the first thing that I want to do, if I split this down the middle, 956 stays. And over here I can simplify because all of this can be simplified on my calculator. So if you do 3.14, so grab your calculator, 3.14 times 9 squared, or 9 times 9, and divide that by 3, you end up with 84.8. Now some of you probably got 0.78, and it's the same. I'm just rounding it off. That's another reason why one of the answers when you're done are always slightly different. Remember, as long as they're close, you can mark it right. And we still have times h because we haven't figured out what the h is yet, okay? So now we know that in order to get h by itself, h is being multiplied, we have to divide both sides by 84.8. So it's just a one-step equation. These cancel out, leaving us with h by itself. So now you do this division. 956 divided by 84.8, and you get 11.27. So I'm going to round it to 11.3. And the units will be feet. Now the units are only feet, not feet cubed, because remember, feet cubed is for volume. So when we're doing just the height, it's just measuring the length of something, so the units are just plain. Okay? So we're using that same formula, simplify what you can, and then solve the one-step equation. All right, I want you guys to try one on your own. This is an Oyo from the book, Oyo number 2. So here is my cone for this one. Another sideways cone. And our height is not known, so we just use h. And then I have a radius of 15 yards. Okay? The other dimension they give us is the volume. We know is 7,200 yards cubed. Okay, so remember we're starting with that same formula. V equals pi times r squared times h divided by 3. So go ahead and pause the movie and go ahead and do your work. Remember, you're going to just start by filling in your information from the picture to where it goes. Simplify that whole section here and then divide both sides by the number next to h. Okay, go ahead and do that. All right, so hopefully you ended up with something that looks like this. V equals 3.14, or pi if you like writing this pi symbol, times 15 squared times h divided by 3. Now I can do this whole thing on my calculator. I can simplify. And when I do 3.14 times 15 squared divided by 3, you end up with, oh, I forgot this. Instead of V, it's supposed to be 7,200. Sorry. So 7,200. When you do all this multiplication, you end up with 235.5. And we still have times h. Okay, so now to get the h by itself, we have to undo that multiplication. Remember from our experience with equations, that means you got to divide both sides. So divide both sides by 235.5, and over here, same thing, 235.5. Okay? So these cancel out, and h by itself is what we wanted. When you do this division, you should end up with 30.6. And remember, that's just yards. It's not cubed because it's just a distance from the top to the bottom of that cone. Okay? All right, so that's the first part of it, missing height. Now we're going to do missing radius. It's basically the same thing. You're going to be plugging in an r here, right? Because we don't know what it is. We will know the height. We'll know to divide by 3 because it's a cone. We'll know pi. What's going to make it tricky is that the r is squared. So we're going to have an extra step to do. I'm sure some of you are already thinking ahead that you might know what that extra step is, because you remember how to undo squaring a number. All right, so let's see here. You know what? I didn't do this, but let's go back and label this part missing so we'll know which part of the notes is which. This one is missing height. Okay, so now our new one, let's label missing radius. Okay, so we know same formula. Let's draw a picture, and this is actually in the book on page 347. They don't have good examples of this in the book, so I'm just going to go through some of the problems. And the first one I'm going to do is actually number 6. It's some of the problems in the book. Okay, the cone looks like this. It's a big wide cone. Okay, and here we go. So the dimensions they give us, the height is 4.7 centimeters. Remember, it doesn't matter if you have a decimal. It's okay because it works the same. Decimals are just numbers between 0 and 1. The radius we don't know, so we're just going to leave that as r. And the volume we know is 938 centimeters cubed. Okay? So our formula remains the same. Volume equals pi times r squared times h divided by 3. So let's fill in what we know. We know that the volume here is this, 938. We know that pi is 3.14. We don't know the radius, so we just leave that as r squared. We know that h is 4.7. And we know the whole thing is divided by 3 because it's a cone. All right? So once again, we're using our knowledge of that equations. You guys have probably noticed that in every single unit we've done this year, we constantly go back to those equations. That's like the foundation of all of our algebra. So here, it looks tricky because it's spread out, but you're just going to simplify this part. So we're going to go right around r squared. So I'm going to do 3.14 times 4.7 because the order that you multiply doesn't matter. Like 3 times 2 is 6 or 2 times 3 is 6. It's the same. So you can mix the order up. So you're going to do 3.14 times 4.7 and divide it by 3. Okay? So we end up with 4.9 when you simplify all that inside the circle. Now you still have r squared there, so that's times r squared. And over here, this is still 938. All right, so remember what we know about equations. To get r by itself, we have to undo that multiplication. So we're going to divide both sides by 4.9. Okay, these two cancel out because 4.9 divided by 4.9 is 1, which means 1r squared is just r squared, right? And over here, do this division. 938 divided by 4.9, you should end up with 191.4. Okay? Now, that seems kind of big for a radius if the height's only 4.7, for the radius to be 191. And that's true. It's too big because we're not done yet. You'll notice that r is by itself, but r is squared. So remember, if you go back to the last chapter, to get the r by itself, you have to undo squaring. So remember, we have to take the square root of 191.4, and that will get r by itself. So when your calculator, punch in square root of 191.4, and you end up with 13.8 centimeters for r. Okay, and that makes more sense in the picture. Okay, so it's the same as the missing height, but you have this extra step of square rooting because you're undoing that exponent of 2 there. To undo that, you take square root. All right, so let me give you one to do on your own. Okay, draw another cone. You'll get really good at drawing these cones. Okay, there's our cone. Height is 7 inches. Radius is unknown, so we're just going to call it r. The volume is 1,204 inches cubed. Okay, so once again, same formula. V equals pi times r squared times h divided by 3. Okay, and what I want you guys to know is too, on most tests that you guys ever take, like standardized tests, like a college entrance exam or the PTSA or the M-STEP, they're going to give you these formulas ahead of time. You have to know how to use them, but most of the time they give you what they call a reference sheet, and all these formulas will be on there for you. You don't have to have those permanently memorized in your brain bank. Okay? All right, so go ahead and pause the video, work this problem out. Okay, so hopefully you remembered to do this part. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? I forgot to fill in what we know. So V equals 3.14 times, we don't know r squared, times height is 7. divided by 3. Okay, so the first step is to simplify what we know. So in that circle, that means you're doing 3.14 times 7 divided by 3. And we know that the volume, 1,204. Okay, so we end up with 1,204 equals, when you do 3.14 times 7 divided by 3, you end up with 7.3 times, we still have r squared, right? So now we're going to solve this like a one-step equation. Divide both by 7.3. These cancel out, so r squared is by itself. And over here, 1,204 divided by 7.3 is about 164.9. Now remember, these are decimals that are rounding. So if you rounded a little bit different, or if you rounded here, or maybe you waited till here, either one, as long as you're close, you're okay. So this is still r squared. So to get r, we have to take square root. Remember, that's the last step always when you have the missing radius. 164.9. So take the square root of 164.9 and you end up with 12.8 inches for the radius. Okay? All right, any questions, go ahead and email me. Remember, you can always pause or rewind or go back to the video if you want another explanation of something. There's a choice of worksheets for you to do, and then don't forget the self-assessment. All right, so let's look at our planner here for this week. So today is June 3rd. Or you might be watching it on Wednesday, June 4th. And what you're going to do today is watch video and take notes. So you already did that part. Okay. You want to choose a worksheet. There's 3 of them. I want 3rd and 4th hour to do the last one listed. I have it specifically labeled volume work. And I have it labeled 3rd and 4th hour. And then you're going to complete the worksheet. Okay, check the worksheet. Remember, the key is always included. And then the last thing I want you to do is the self-assessment. And that's for lesson 11. Okay, so the self-assessment on lesson 11. So we had lessons 10 and 11 this week. Next week will be our last week. And next week we'll have lesson 12 and then a quiz. All right, so we've only got one more week. And then you guys can clean up all your school stuff. Okay? All right, if you have any questions, just send me an email and I will get back to you. Okay, thanks. Have a great weekend.